Good morning, folks. Shannon Guernsey here with Minnesota NAHRO. So glad you're able to join us this morning. Uh, we are, this is our sixth in the series for our maintenance staff and property managers. And this topic today is fair housing. Now, I must say, I'm so excited that Lisa is with us and able to present. She's been a great expert and speaker for us we've had her on other topics, but we've not had her on fair housing. So thank you, Lisa, so glad you're able to do this with us. I will say at one point I did have someone from HUD who was possibly going to do this, but of course with the possible shutdown, that didn't seem like a very good idea to have that speaker lined up. And even though they didn't go and shut down, it was a possibility, as you all know. So glad that we're able to have this morning. We're going to be 90 minutes at most. I am recording, and that's for those of you who there are some who are not signed on and needed to see the recording. But for you, those of you with us this morning, thank you. We will be taking questions by chat. Also, it might be possible, I'll also watch if you want to raise your hand and you want to ask the question directly, we'll be able to do that too because of the size of our group. So with that, we have Lisa Marvin. She is CEO of Essence Properties Management. I think it's all three of those. And she's also been incredibly active and very much involved. So she knows all aspects of property management, has really, she's been there, seen firsthand, dealt with firsthand with many issues and in the area that we all work in. And so in addition to bringing her expertise on fair housing, she is also going to bring her insights and experience and share with you because this can be a tough area at times. And so glad to have her here. And at this point, all of you hopefully have the screen up and able to see her slides. Last thing I will say is she will share her slides with me and I will be sharing them with the group after the fact. So with that, I am going to say thank you again, Lisa, for being here, and I turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. And good morning, everyone. And so who doesn't want to wake up at 8 o'clock and start on fair housing, right? And so that's an exciting way to get our morning started. And we'll try to have a good time, as always, give you a ton of information. Use your chat. If you can make sure you're muted, that helps us so background doesn't come into play. And we'll begin. And so we're going to cover a lot. But at the end, if you have a question that you don't want to ask until the end, you can do that. Otherwise, feel free to shoot it into the chat during the training, and we'll both be watching it, and we'll try to answer those as we can. So where, after all, the universal human rights really begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they can't be seen on any maps of the world. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, and equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. So that was from Eleanor Roosevelt. And I like to start out our training because I know how hard that we work in this industry to do the right thing. I know that. And as much as we do it, and sometimes we could even do it perfectly, we still can face a claim. Somebody believes they were discriminated against. And so we have to go through the process. And it's hard on our heart. It's hard on our wallet, because we all bring attorneys in immediately to deal with it because it can impact us. And so today what I try to do is sprinkle in not only rules and policies, but some common sense thoughts about how to avoid a problem. And let me be real direct. Right now in the United States, we don't believe there's been one fair housing claim that started out, the manager was so nice. The maintenance technician was so nice. Doesn't start out that way, right? So we know that. We know that we got to try to put our best cap on every day, warm and welcoming. And I also know, after doing this for 31 years, there are days that our hearts and our souls are a little tired. And so we know we just got to keep plugging ahead and working on those items. So, of course, the federally protected classes: race, sex, religion, familial status, disability, national origin, and color. So I know a couple of you are driving, so please don't do what I'm going to just ask. But if you're at your desk safely, I want you to use your chat, and I want you to tell me in your chat, of those right there listed, which one in the last 7 to 10 years has been the #1 area that our industry has been sued over. Use your chat. Tell me what you think. Pick one of those. Which one is the one that is the most challenging for us right now and bringing the most cases against us? And as we get a few, I'll start kind of sharing some of those. So the first one that I've seen is race, and that is not the answer. It definitely was the answer past that time. In the last 7 to 10 years, it has not been race. Who else has got an answer? Tell me what you think. Race, sex, religion, familial status, disability, national origin, or color. And I know some of you are sitting in groups, so you're probably going to nominate somebody to be the typer. So I appreciate that. So we've got disability, sex, we've got color up there so far, and I really appreciate those of you that are participating. But it is disability. It is disability. #1 area, most cases, unbelievable amount of cases. And I will also share with you with the Human Rights Office alone in Minnesota is taking significant cases on regarding a particular area on disability. And I'm going to talk about that more as we go. So out of those federally protected disability, but there is one that we're seeing escalate, jump quickly, and that is familial status. And I want to talk about that one just a bit. And so I know that you know the definitions of the protected classes. You've been in the industry a long time, and we'll be talking kind of about different particular items regarding these. But familial status is one that we want to kind of zone in a little bit on and talk about today, along with we're going to really dive into disability. So familial status is simply the protection of family with children. It was added in '88, as was disability. So some of you in this call might not have even been born yet. I mean, so it's not been that long ago that these two were added as protected classes. So familial status, what happened is in the United States in the early '80s, they had done a survey, and they found that approximately 82% of housing was adult only housing. And so they didn't have to rent to families with children, and it wasn't a protected class, so they didn't have to do it. Well, that was a problem. So then they introduced a protected class, and then it kind of just sat there. Yes, people started to become educated. You know, it takes a long time to spread a message throughout the whole United States, right? And so we didn't hear too much about it. Well, now we're starting to see some cases come and more and more. And so I want to just dive into a couple things. So first of all, rules and policies that restrict families and children should be avoided unless something absolutely can be justified. Sometimes it could be pool and sometimes it could be fitness center, but be very careful. You know, we used to say in training, I've been a certified fair housing specialist for probably over a decade and been teaching over 20 years. And we used to say, you know, go use your manual, it'll tell you. Well, I recently had to read the manual to deal with something, and it doesn't actually really tell you too much about that. So you guys have to make good decisions on what's safety and so forth on that. Keep in mind, wording matters. Children, stop skateboarding on the property. So I always share this case. It's one that we talk about. So an association in Minnesota, an association means, in this particular one, they owned the property. Okay, does that make sense? They owned them, but a management company ran the association. And so there were older people, younger people, families, single, you know, it was not a senior development by any case, but it just happened to have quite a few seniors. And the seniors came into management and said, listen, these kids are skateboarding all over the place. They're going to knock me over. I'm going to break my hip. And, you know, they were very concerned about this. Okay. So management sent out a memo, everybody's door, children, no more skateboarding. So several weeks passed and they were served papers and they were sued. Okay. And so that, and why is that? Well, you can definitely have a policy that says no more skateboarding, but it's even for grandma. No more skateboarding is for everyone. I don't know of a memo that you're going to send out anymore that's going to be directed to children. Good, bad, rule, issue, throwing rocks at cars. You're going to tell everybody to stop throwing rocks at cars. You've got people running in the hall, and maybe it is all kiddos. You're going to tell everyone to stop running in the hall. We're not going to send out a memo, a newsletter, a letter that directly targets children or families. We're going to talk to the whole building about those issues. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't deal. So let's say Johnny is out on the swing set and he breaks things on purpose. And you're going to hold the household accountable if that's your rules. You can't damage property. And so I'm not saying you can't hold a household accountable for something. I'm talking about sending memos out and letters out and targeting. It's really important, okay? So keep that in mind for that part of the familial status. And of course, the occupancy is where we're starting to see some of the cases. Two of the cases in Minnesota that first started to get some people concerned were 5 individuals, and out of the household of 5, one of the kiddos was under either 2 or 1, wanted a 2-bedroom. And the management company said, no, we allow 2 people per bedroom and you have to take a 3-bedroom. And so that started some cases, and one of them settled privately, so we don't know, and we have not heard where the other one has settled. So some of us decided to say, you know, we'll allow up to 4 individuals in a 2-bedroom, and there is a possibility to have 1 additional if an individual is under the age of 2 or 1. Some people have chosen to do that. Some are so very small that that isn't a good idea. They're very, very small 2-bedrooms, and you're going to have to look at a lot of things, which we'll talk about. Now, many of you, of course, are HRAs, Housing and Redevelopment Authorities, helping with the with our voucher program, Housing Choice Voucher Program. And sometimes it's just lovely for some of us when you just say, they get it, this family gets a 3-bedroom. Oh, great. We'll run with that, you know. So we want people to decide what they want, right? In non-voucher holders, my husband and I could come and say, I want a 3-bedroom. Okay, great. You know, we don't have in rules of you can only have a 1-bedroom. You can only have a 2-bedroom, right? If I want and I can afford it and I meet your criteria and there's only 2 of us, of course we can do that. If somebody has a voucher, some of you have changed. This has been very interesting to watch what's been happening with that. Some of you have look at children's age. Some of you don't look at children's age anymore. I mean, there's all kinds of unique things. And so for somebody like myself, who's in over 30 different cities in Minnesota, you know, we just try to adapt and figure out, you know, what's happening with this. Where HUD's looking at is the example of you being too, not you particularly, but our industry being too restrictive. I'll only allow 3 people in a 2-bedroom. Okay, well, what would be your reasoning for that? And you're going to have to look real hard to be able to prove that you're not trying to avoid renting to families. And so that's where we're doing some training all over the state on those areas. Now, I want you to use your chat again, if you will, if you can participate with me. I know it's Zoom. And here is the question for you. I'm trying to get I got my screen putting a light on my head, so I apologize for that. Sue and John and their 2 children, Lizzie, who's 17, and Dan, who is 16, would like to rent your 2-bedroom apartment. It's perfect for their needs. Now, I understand that many of you are in a position of not only maintenance, but also an HRA, and you have some rules. But I want you to think about this question for a second. I want you to change roles for just a second and be the property manager at ABC Apartments. Okay, ABC Apartments. And so Sue and John and their 2 children, Lizzie, who's 17, and Dan, who's 16, they want to rent your 2-bedroom apartment. It's perfect for their needs. So tell me, you're the manager of ABC Apartments. Tell me if you would allow them to take your 2-bedroom. Yes or no? Not why at this point yet. Just tell me yes or no. And use your chat if you could. And then I'm going to ask you a second question. So tell me in your chat yes or no if you would allow Sue and John and their 2 children, Lizzie, who's 17, and Dan, who's 16, to rent your 2-bedroom. It's perfect for their needs. And of course, we're not talking about if they qualify. Let's just say they got great credit, they got good job, all those things, income is good. And so, so far I got several yeses and one no. And so, yes, and so one of you even put, yeah, they're 2 or 3, whatever they wanted, their choice, right? Now, I know per your housing choice voucher and per your HR, you may have rules because of age. You may still have a rule that says they get a 3-bedroom. I get that. I'm just talking about the lowly manager doesn't have the wonderful, HRA behind them making this decision. Now, I want to just quick tell you something, an interesting story. So I teach for about 12 different law enforcement groups during their 8-hour, what was called the crime-free training. And I do fair housing and applicant screening. And one of the times I was teaching a particular individual, these are sometimes a lot of small owners, and I don't mean ever to be disrespectful, but there's just a different sometimes level of knowledge than having one home that they took to rent than having 4,000 apartments in the state and so forth. And so the woman was appalled by this. Where is that girl and that boy gonna sleep? And you make me. I mean, this woman she lost it. I'm like, ooh, sensitive subject. So here's what I always remind people in a good training. A tip for people is if you went and got a mortgage, let's just say I asked the group, how many of you have a mortgage? Some people raised their hands. I said, when you went in to secure that mortgage, did they ask you who's sleeping with who? I mean, if they did, I would suggest that that's probably not the mortgage company you want to use. Of course, we don't get involved in that in the regular property management hat that we're wearing. The HRA might say, you get a 3-bedroom voucher. Great. That's wonderful. You may have some rules with that. So I bring it up, and I purposely put Lizzie 17 and Dan 16 because our job, there are families in their culture that are going to share one room. Doesn't matter. Give them 10 bedrooms. This is their culture. This is their faith. This is what they do. And there will be some people that Dan might get the fold-out couch. Dan might sleep in the bathtub. I don't know where Dan's going to sleep, or Lizzie, whoever is. We're just not going to dive into that. Now, I've told you 2 things. Familial status, hot topic. We want to be mindful of our criteria. We want to be mindful of what our processes are and our procedures on this, so we're never limiting too much someone's ability to rent with us, let alone trying to not allow families. So if you have a question on familial status, again, I talked about notices. We don't direct notices about children or families. We don't target them. I don't want to walk into a building and do an inspection. So I have some owners right now looking to buy, and before they do, I come out with them and we walk all the homes. I don't want to come to a 6-building complex or community and find one building magically has all families, and 4 buildings have no families. Well, how'd that happen? Because you're never, ever going to get through a HUD case to be able to explain how you didn't steer families to one building, right? So we're always being very mindful of multiple areas of familial status. So some additional Minnesota ones: marital status, creed, sexual orientation, and public assistance. And of course, you all know that each city that we're doing business in, we need to check. St. Paul has age and ancestry. Mankato has students are protected. So, cities can also add additional protected classes. All right. I wanted to talk briefly about disparate impact with your group particularly, and many other. I do it in more advanced fair housing because in 2015, the Supreme Court decided that this is going to be added to the Fair Housing Act. And so we all kind of went, wow, what does that mean? And what's happening? And where are we seeing challenges or concerns about this? And so, of course, it's used, I don't know if attack is the right word, but it does attack policies and practices. Because I could read it to you and you would say, well, geez, Lisa, that seems very neutral. I understand why you're doing that, but could possibly have a disproportionate impact on a protected class. So a lot of us had to really dive into, our screening criteria, our occupancy standards, and I think the next one will be credit standards. That is going to be looked at a bit more. And so the criminal screening criteria was really a challenge for many people. Some of us, our attorneys put together, I think I have a 38-page document internally in our compliance department that helps me figure out, is this conviction something that we can deny for? Is it not? Is it this? So it became complicated. What used to happen, because HUD said to us and really drilled it into us for many years, you must treat everyone the same. And what came from that then is a blanket policy. So remember, I've been in the industry 31 years, so a long time. And it used to be, we had policies that said no felony, no matter what it was, you ain't living here. I mean, it was written a little bit differently than that, because that was the only way we could treat people fairly, because how could we do it otherwise? So that's called a blanket policy. And that is the first area that we want to get rid of, because we tell people in training constantly, you may not have a blanket policy. And that is the first group that, in fact, will be targeted and has been and should be under this, right? And so then occupancy standards come into play. What's reasonable, what's not, what's safe, what's not, hard decisions, so many things that come in together with that. And then credit, of course, is another challenge that they're going to be able to look at. One of the examples in one of the trainings that I did with a group of attorneys, and I think even legal aid was with us during this, we talked about an example. So let's just say there's a little city called ABC City, and ABC City has 3% Hispanic living in the city when they did their census. And when they ran statistics, 78% of the arrests and charged were Hispanic. And then when they went further to run the statistics, they said that the ones who got felonies and did not get to bargain down were Hispanic. Ones who got to bargain down to maybe a gross misdemeanor or some other items were in fact non-Hispanic. And so if those items could be proved, then could you say, well, property management then using criminal backgrounds might have an adverse or negative impact on a protected class? You possibly could say that. HUD has really come back out in other groups to say, most of them have said, we're not saying you can't do your criminal background check, your public record. We don't use criminal background check anymore. We use public record check. So that could be changed in some of your notes in your verbiage. And so I think that what you have to have is an understanding of what really poses a risk to other residents, to the property, whether it be value, whether it be, what goes on. In some of the cities, you may know this or may not know this, they have strikes and rules that penalize. New Hope has a very strong one. Fridley has one. St. Cloud has one. So if you get, so the police are called and we didn't call the police, we get our first notice. Please come in. We get, it just depends on the program. So then you have to look at your screen, okay, what's going to get us? In some of the cities, they can take away the rental dwelling license of that apartment. And so it's a fear thing, of course, and that would be bad, right? So there's lots to play into this. It's challenging for us, there's no doubt. Now, this case is it's at the heart of where the change has to happen. And I know my screen is, or my view of me is in a little bit of the way, but in the same exact Oklahoma court, okay, the same exact one, first time the person on my left looking at it, the black man on the left, first offense, got 5 years of jail, prison. Right, Caucasian male, had 3 priors, got 12 months probation. That's a problem. That's a problem. And no, I'm not trying to throw anybody under bus in courts or anything else. I understand everybody's job is a challenge, but that's a problem, right? And so then how does it connect back? It connects back to we have barriers to get into housing, and some of them are good. I mean, people that have committed violent crimes or sexual crimes or burglary, and I mean, those are things we have to try to do the best of our ability to protect our residents, right? So it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge for us, and it's one that we're watching and we're looking at and dealing with. Now, the occupancy standard, where they're going with some of this is, I want to share this case with you. So a family of 5 adults and 6 minor children. Now, I want you to hear when I said a family. Some of the HRAs may define a family. Most of us in property management do not define a family, because for heaven's sakes, I do not want to define a family. And so we're pretty broad in how we, if those 5 adults are let's say an example are 2 parents and grandparents and, whatever, we don't, looks like family to me, right? So this case, a family of 5 adults and 6 minor children applied to rent a 6-bedroom home. And if you go with the 2 people per bedroom thought process, which is not a requirement, it isn't really a law. People think it's an old memo, and we understand all that, and you all know that. But let's just say we decided we were going to try to stick with 2 people per bedroom. So it's 6-bedroom, 5 bathrooms, 2 kitchens, library, sauna, sunroom, fitness room. Woo! 7,000 square feet. Woo! So a broker, meaning a real estate, it was a real estate company, and so that broker and owner told the people that the functional capacity of the house was exceeded with this application, and they thought they might damage the septic system. And then the owner declined to rent, or then said, actually, if we did rent, we're going to charge you $1,000 more. So the settlement was $74,000, and remember, that doesn't have any attorney fees in that. That's just the HUD settlement, because what they did there was wrong. Now, when I teach a lot of small owners in a lot of the crime-free classes, I'm like, I'm a little direct with them. I don't want to hear it. If you chose to buy a 5-bedroom house, then you understand that you very well may be renting to 10 or 11, whatever it is, however it works out. Then don't buy a 5-bedroom house if you don't want to do that. Hello. I mean, so I don't have a lot of room for the cry table for that. It is what it is. And so, and sometimes it's the same reason. I'm often talking to real estate agents, and the same thing I say very respectfully to them. If I bought a cabin, which I happen to buy a cabin, I'm a broker. I still brought in a real estate salesperson, because you know what? I don't buy and sell homes every day. I'm not knowledgeable. And yep, I'm a broker, and yeah, I passed my test, and I do better on the management side of the tests and exams than I do on the selling of the home. So I'm smart enough to bring, hey, I need your wisdom to buy this. If I was getting into an apartment building or helping owners buy apartment buildings or did anything about that, 31 years, I got it, I know it, I'm learning, I'll be much more comfortable, right? So sometimes, we stress to people, before you jump in and go help that client or customer rent that home, you best know what you're doing, because it's complicated, right? It's complicated. So for our maintenance and our managers teams on this part of what we talk about, even in it's still fair housing, we really want to talk about, we're going to move into boundaries, because boundaries are incredibly important. I do some assistance for companies at times, some consulting, and I'll give you a couple of unique examples. So one group I helped, a household was moved out. The move out was sitting on the manager's desk. Just giving you an example. And it happened to be the maintenance technician saw it, no problem, took the resident's phone number, and then the following day reached out to the resident and asked if the resident wanted to go on a date. His thinking was, I know the rules. When their rule of that company is there's no dating residents, there's no getting involved with residents, clear lines. She moved out. But of course, what was the problem on that? Well, we don't go on people's desks, and we don't take phone numbers, and we don't, there was a lot of, and the woman called the office and said, I don't want, this makes me very uncomfortable. Okay. So there's a problem there. So we want to always be real clear on boundaries because we want everyone to be successful. And we want people to say, you know, one of the classes I'm going to be teaching in Dallas in 2 weeks is called Use Your Words. So before you do that, take the phone number, let's use our words and let's ask. Make sure that that's okay so we don't get into a real predicament here and a problem, right? And then, of course, we try to do a good job of explaining the why. Why is this not okay? Great question. I'm so glad you asked me before. This is the answer is no, and here's the why, right? So boundaries are important for our managers, for our maintenance, for our caretakers, for our leasing, for all people who take, you know, whether you're taking incomes and getting people ready to all the roles in the HRA, in property management together, we all have boundaries. We all have things that we got to make sure we understand and know. So we try to talk with our technicians a lot, women and men, to help them understand, you know, of course, we know there's no touching. We don't touch people, and we know that. But we're really careful even how we shake hands, on how we do things. And of course, I do shake hands often. And it's not very easy on this Zoom, but when I shake and grab someone's hand, and then I start patting them, or I touch their arm, you know, I shake their hand, and my other hand, I touch their arm, I'm opening a further door to say it's okay to touch my arm. And I'm just saying to you that little bit, be careful what you're doing and what we're saying and what doors we're opening by how we greet people, right? I want you to be warm and welcoming. I want you to have a genuine smile on your face. That's all good things, but just be careful. Avoid comments about the resident's physical appearance. And really, we probably do that with a lot of areas of our work, coworkers and so forth. You look good today. Oh, yeah, you know, and I'm not saying you can't say it. That is such a cute dress, but you better know who your audience is. And I don't think that should ever be said to a resident. Whether or not that's said to a teammate, that, you know, we got to figure those things out and what's okay and what's not. And so we try not to ever comment on our customers' appearance, right? It's kind of the thing. Now, I'm not saying a manager at my senior property, I was there the other day, I told a woman, that is the most beautiful scarf they had, and it was beautiful. I'm not saying, oh, I'm just saying, you gotta know your audience. You gotta know what your company's policies are. You gotta be mindful. We don't ask residents on dates. We don't text personal messages. We don't do things. We still are dealing in the United States with sexual harassment challenges and concerns. And you know, there are some people that are awful silly and put things in writing that are terrible. Now, I'm not saying to you, oh, then just don't put it in writing. I'm saying it's wrong. I'm saying you got to be careful of what you're texting. You got to be careful who you're emailing. You know, I got an email yesterday, and it took actually last week from someone, and I'm like, yeah, wrong person. It happens. You know, it happens. My name is Lisa. This is Lisa. I get emails wrong. I sent emails wrong. I know. So then take a second, obviously check it, but also make sure that whatever you're sending, no matter who it is, what it is, that we're very careful in those items, right? So just be mindful of those areas. I'm sure most of the properties and places and groups have rules about drinking with residents. Terrible idea. We don't invite residents. Hey, did you want to ride to church on Sunday? Yeah, we don't do that. I'm sorry. I understand when you come to me and say, I'm just trying to be nice. Yeah, I understand, but you can't do it. And so we're very careful of those areas of when we step over. Unless in your job description, we don't give rides to residents. We don't take residents to lunch unless there's something unusual in and of course, your company policies. These are just things that we typically do not see. And we really, really work hard of not allowing people to have personal cell phones and addresses. I had to assist an HRA because occasionally I do some assisting during cases before they go to trial and be I'm a neutral mediator. And so this resident, I mean, from standing in the door of the office, arm up, legs apart, to not let her leave, to going to her other, she has a different job. You know, every HRA isn't the same. Some are very tiny, some are very big, you know, some are very, going to her other job and harassing her, calling her home. I mean, inappropriate. And you, and as a myself, as an employer, you know, we have responsibilities, right? But we got to set those things up right away. We got to be able to shut those things down right away, and we got to move quickly, so it doesn't escalate into any of our teammates being unsafe or other residents being unsafe. And so we got to make sure that we never do these things, and we got to make sure that we, of course, respond when they happen, because it's very serious, and we want people to enjoy coming to work and feel safe and comfortable. So how do we really address boundary issues? Well, first, remove yourself from the situation when possible. Report the uncomfortable situation to your supervisor. Consider using a buddy system in homes. I'll give you an example. So many years, I bet this was almost 20 years ago, we got a call that the police were called, and the resident said the maintenance technician, I don't know how else to say it, dropped his pants and showed his private part. So I immediately left to go to that property because I'm going to deal with this. This person had been with us for several years. Very, very good technician. And I am of the heart, to the best of my ability, I believe nothing until it's something. I just can only tell you, in all the years I've done this, I don't know. I get fibbed to, it feels like, on a daily basis. And I don't mean to put any person under the ball with that, but I just happen. So I don't believe nothing until it's something. So I get there and we do an investigation, and we do this. That maintenance technician is crying in the office. I hug him. I mean, he's mortified because of course, he didn't do it. He tells me, and I said, listen to me. Let's just start. I got you. We're gonna go through this. And in the end, he was fully cleared. This person has significant mental illness, has done this type of thing before. Social workers were involved. We got people involved. And do you know that resident lived with us for another 10 years after that? Now, there's a lot into that situation, but we never, in that whole decade, no matter what, went into that home without two people going forward. That was the only way I could do this. And with everything noted, that maintenance technician, though, he didn't stay with us. He didn't stay in the industry. It hurt him terribly, and it can cause great destruction for people. So we have to have good policies, good procedures, so people know where not to get close to the line. And then we got to have each other's back when we go and deal with things. And then whatever happens, we got to deal with it, right? And so I just think that there are times, and there are residents in our portfolio, because we're all over the state, that no matter what, two people have to go because of whatever's occurred. We had a resident hit on the maintenance technician. And I mean, oh, come on, let's just go have a beer. And none of that. I wouldn't stop. The maintenance technician immediately went and told. Now, the manager is his wife. I'm like, oh. So I'm like, oh. So anyways, we dealt with it, but I said, well, you got to go with now. She's like, oh, I will. I'm like, oh. So, and they were fine. And that resident stayed many years. But two people, as soon as we have a challenge, we try to double up. Or in fact, it's mandatory, depending on what has occurred. So again, I don't want to go too much more on this. I just want you to know really good rules, really good understanding, have training on it. Let people be comfortable enough to say, ask me your question. If you don't want to do it in training in front of everyone, if you don't want to come into my office, ask me. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to help you make successful decisions. Because if you're successful, we're successful, and it all goes well. So let's jump now again to advertising. And I'm going to, if my slide is correct, ask you to use your chat and tell me, I covered up the phone number, the rest of it. Tell me if there's anything wrong with this sign. Out in a beautiful field, an individual I was teaching in North Dakota, I was teaching there, and a person a couple weeks later sent me this thing and said, stop. I think they can't have this sign. I'm like, why do you think that? So is it something for rent? 55 and better active living community, the phone number and the website. Is there actually something wrong with this sign? Use your chat. And if there is, tell me what it is, what you think it is. I'll give you a second to use your chat while I grab a little water. Tell me what's wrong with this sign. For rent, 55 and better active living community. The number and then the web page. Use your chat. And if you think there's nothing wrong with it, it's okay. Tell me that. If you think there's something wrong, tell me what that is. If you don't know, put that in there too, just so I get a feel for what. And I appreciate when I task you when you said, I don't know. That's okay. Does anybody have an idea of what you think? So I'll go further and tell you there's a word that shouldn't be in the sign. And I love that you think it's better, and better is actually okay. And you could be right. Duluth says, you know, better might offend people. So 55 and better has been used for a long time to talk about senior development. And so it's actually not better. So I love that you think it's better. And you could be right. You could pick a different word if you didn't like it, but that isn't the word. So I'll tell you what the word is. It's active. Yes, Shannon got it. So it's active. So in the protected class, when we talk about disability, of course, somebody having a disability, and I know some of you are like, Lisa, are you sure she didn't mean that they're going to have activities? So active living could possibly tell someone that's in a wheelchair, uses a walker, somebody that's paraplegic, somebody that's whatever disability with mobility, that this isn't the property for you. Now, I used this for 2 years in training, and every time after the training, people are like, wait, stop. You should call them and just let them know, like, oh, you know, I'm going to tell you 2 times in my life, I've reached out when I've been made aware somebody's doing something wrong to try to help them. One of them was an individual that only allowed companion animals and service animals to be in one building of the 4 or 5 unit property. Didn't care what the rules are. And when I called him, he ripped my head off and rolled it down the road. It's just I'm like, okay, whatever. So I finally caved and I did call this group. Just a lovely, lovely young lady answered. What an awkward call. Hello, I'm Lisa. And I just wanted to talk to you about your sign. So I tell her about teaching and that somebody sent me the picture. And I just wanted to say, and her exact response was, well, we're going to have activities. I said, I know, but active and activities are different. And I said, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm not telling you anybody will ever catch it. People asked me to call you. I just wanted to tell you. So what do we take from this? We take a couple things. Try to have one person, the most educated, most knowledgeable, doing signs and monument signs. And if you're going to put signs by your tot lot, if you're going to put an ad in the newspaper, you understand truly what the rules are. And if you think that the newspaper, oh, they wouldn't put it in if it's not correct, I'm going to tell you that's not true. A particular individual put an ad in, I think it was it might have been the St. Paul Pioneer Press, but it might have been, I can't think of the other big magazine in the cities. I can't think of it for the moment. But anyways, an individual put an ad in the paper that said, Somali residents wanted, and gave the phone number. And he got charged in a HUD complaint. And he's like, he was just trying to help the Somali family. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And nor did the paper not put the ad in that everybody saw and that everybody reported to HUD. And, you know, so you really have to be knowledgeable about what you can say. You know, we're not going to put an ad. Our new apartment building is right next to St. St. Paul's Catholic Church. I mean, most people got the GPS now and got the Google. They can find their way. We're going to be real mindful. We're just simply going to give addresses out. We're going to be real careful on all areas of that we do. There was a sign, there was an ad put in the paper, no teenagers allowed. What? Now, I'm human and I understand, and I'm an empty nester. I've raised 2 children. I get, teenagers maybe could be a challenge, whatever. I don't know. Yeah, sued. That cannot be in the paper, cannot be in the ad. Active senior living, there has been cases. So we want to really review the signs. If you're doing HUD, if you're doing the Facebook marketing place, I think is what it's called, be very careful. Facebook got sued, and rightfully so, because you actually could go in and pick. You only wanted to advertise to men. You only wanted to advertise to women. You only wanted to. It gave options that housing does not allow us in our ads, and they didn't. They just didn't know. I get that, but that's what happens. So best if you can have the most knowledgeable one person do lots of training on it. There's lots of things being looked at on web pages and some other issues. So a lot of us are scrambling to try to figure out how to get our web pages closer to where we need them, or in fact within the rules. So be mindful of that also. All right, we're going to dive into reasonable accommodation because it's just super important, and it's the area that under disability that we're getting challenged the most. Okay, and so a reasonable accommodation is a change or an exception or an adjustment to a rule or policy or practice or service that may be necessary for a person with a disability, so they can have equal opportunity to enjoy a dwelling, including public and common use areas. A reasonable modification is a structural change made to existing premise occupied or to be occupied by persons with disability in order to afford persons full enjoyment of the premise. Only applicants, residents with disabilities are eligible per se, right? Disability equals physical and or mental impairment, substantially limits one or more major life activities, could be regarded as that. And the nexus between impairment and the request must be there, right? So if I use a walker and I say I need a companion animal, that's great. We're still going to do the paperwork. Because just because I use a walker, it doesn't mean that my doctor, psychologist, who's ever licensed to determine I'm disabled, thinks that I need a dog. They might think I need a dog, but might not, right? One of my only unique that I chuckled a little bit at, reasonable accommodation request came at a senior property. So she came in, and to be real frank, she was unkind in her approach to this, but we deal with that. And I will be given the parking spot right by my apartment. And I am going to get a doctor's note for that. Great. So we send off the request, and the doctor's note, actual note comes back, and the doctor said, I want you to understand that I've actually asked this particular resident to increase their exercising. So what I would encourage you to do, if she would like her own parking spot, is give it to her to the back of the parking area so she gets her walking in. Oh, and I do not approve the parking spot next to her building. Yeah, I'm like, oh, well, he did not take that well. Ooh. So, sometimes those things happen, but normally, and let me also tell you that parking spot for many, many, many years was the #1 request. Of course, in the last 7 to 10 years, that has changed dramatically. And the #1 request is much different than that, right? And so we can deny requests, right? It can't fundamentally alter the building, the program. So one time we had an individual give us about 30 different requests, and they wanted to take our senior 55 and older building and make it assisted living. And that we did not approve that. And at this particular property, she would have had to pay for all the accommodations, depending on if it's federally funded or not, depending on HUD money or home money. This depends on who pays for the accommodation modification requests, right? So it's really important to understand that, have good policies in place. The applicant or resident making the reasonable accommodation or modify is the applicant or resident making reasonable accommodation. You've got to be listening to what they're asking. The applicant or resident of the third party can make a request, and that's supposed to say third party, not third part. The request can be oral or written. You cannot make somebody put in writing. If they want to tell it to you, then you can write it down. And the reference to medical issues is enough to start the process, right? Because I'm going to be frank with you, nobody is going to walk into your office and say, I have a reasonable accommodation request. It doesn't work that way. They tell us about an issue or a problem or a challenge. So, for example, resident, I'm going to ask you some questions, and we'll see if you can use your chat. So a resident who is deaf asks a maintenance technician for a light blinking fire alarm in her home. Do you think that's a reasonable accommodation, or is it simply a maintenance request? Use your chat. Say yes if you think it's a reasonable accommodation. Say no, and that means you just simply think it's a normal maintenance request. Right. That one's straight on a reasonable accommodation request. And whatever your policies or procedures are, how we would deal with that, but we would definitely put that in place for that applicant, hopefully before they move in. And we know maintenance technicians we know those aren't simple. Many times, if it's an older building and we don't have hardwired, we've got to bring electricians out, we've got to run lines to it. I mean, we know that, and we know it's really important to get that done. Who pays for that? Again, depends on the funding source, depends on your policy, right? All right, so the next question is, a resident who walks with a walker asks the property manager for assisted parking space in the garage near the elevator. Some of these I'm giving you a little bit of tough ones. Reasonable accommodation? Yes. Simply a request. And some of you, I can tell, don't know on that one. So I will tell you that we would logically go through the process. What we would assume that would bring us to reasonable accommodation. They're using a walker, they have a mobility issue, but because someone's older, are they disabled? So you're going to look at your policy on that. Your manager is going to come in and say, let me help you. Let's do some paperwork. Let's figure out what we're going to do. And so we'll look at that one. And most likely, we're going to grant that, right? Prospective resident tells the leasing agent, I need an accommodation for my dog because I am training him to be a service dog for someone else. Yes, you have to grant that, or no, you do not. Listen to the question. Prospective resident tells the leasing agent, I need an accommodation for my dog because I'm training him to be a service dog for someone. Is that an accommodation that we'd have to honor? The request for the dog. Right. You guys got it right out of the park. Absolutely not. We don't give accommodations for the dog, right? So we've had a request from a resident say that you can't make my dog be required to be on leash when it's outside because he has anxiety. So just to be very clear, we are here to give the resident or prospective resident an accommodation. We are actually not here to give any dog an accommodation, okay? And you're going to get asked it in times as soon as somebody doesn't like a rule, typically. Okay, resident is not yet eligible for a unit transfer, but tells the assistant property manager that he wants to move to the south side of the building because those units have a little bit better light. Is that an accommodation request? Yeah, and most of you got it right. No, that is not. We have some people that want the apartment on this side because it has morning sun. We have some people who want the apartment on this side because it has afternoon sun. That's great. We try to accommodate those things, but they're not necessarily. Now, the resident is not yet eligible to transfer, but tells the property manager that he wants to move to the south side of the building because he has a seasonal affective disorder. Correct. You guys are knocking it out of the park. That, we put the cap on, called reasonable accommodation land. Now we're going to go through our process. That is the difference. Very good. All right, we're going to keep going on to that. Now here's some modifications, just to give you frank. Somebody could put a request in for a ceiling fan because of a heart condition and they need air to move while they're sleeping. Maybe there's a bathtub cutout, very common at our senior buildings if we didn't put a lot of walk-in showers in. And so that could be for a physical disability. Parking spot could be a mobility. Water softener, we've had that request, interestingly, for some significant physical disability, skin conditions. Doorbell flasher for hearing impaired. Automatic door open, physical disability. Extra lighting outside, visual disability. Grab bars and so forth. So those are typical modifications that we commonly see in our industry. So I want to just talk about assistance animals for a second. So I don't want you to confuse ADA with the Fair Housing Act on this item, okay? So I'm going to ask you a question again to use your chat. Under ADA and under the cap for us of a service animal, there are only 2 animals in the United States that are allowed as a service animal in a place of public, business, airport, the opera, a restaurant, the grocery store, any store, the place where the public goes. When we're talking about this particular item for ADA, when I go to Target to go shopping, I may bring my service animal, and it may only be what or what. Use your chat. Tell me the 2 animals. In the United States. I'm going to let you think about it a little bit. I want to see what you know. So far, I got nothing. Okay. Thank you. Somebody said dog and cat. So dog is right. Somebody put lizard. You're so funny. No, not a lizard. Dog is right. Dog and cat is not right. So we know dog is one of them. What's the other one? In the United States, these are the only 2 service animals that I like Clay County. They're pretty funny. No, the hamster's not it. Not a bird. Not a cat. Not a lizard. What's the second animal in the United States? Not a fish. Not a rat. Not a monkey. Not a pig. Not a chinchilla. Yes, Duluth HRA got it. Miniature horse. So under ADA, there is a provision to have a service dog, and then there is a separate provision that you could have a miniature horse. There's a long history behind it. There's a reasoning. They actually live significantly longer than the dog. The miniature horses can be trained. You can watch some really fun, go to the YouTube, and I think Finney is one that was in training the last couple years and took his first flight. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, if I'm on that airplane and there's a service miniature horse, I'd be like, I want my seat changed because I want to sit next to the horse. I have a lot of questions. I just would love it, right? But so those are the 2. So let's not get those confused, and let's talk about that a little bit, right, to make sure we understand. So if I go into Target and I bring my kitty cat, Target can say, take the cat out of here right now. You're seeing on some of the sliding doors that open, service dogs only allowed because I think they just chose not to put the miniature horse thing. I don't know whether right or wrong of that answer, but only service animal allowed. We're seeing that on doors too. Now, Minnesota, of course, put some laws into place. And let me be very frank to you, the people that wanted those laws put into place were people with disabilities, because they were tired of people taking advantage of it that didn't have disabilities, right? So now if you falsify and it's not a service animal, you could be charged with it. I think it's a petty misdemeanor. You could get a fine and so forth. And so they wanted this to stop. So people that really had a disability and really needed a service or companion animal, different a bit. So let's talk about that. Let's go into the next part of this. So an assistant animal is an animal that works to provide assistance, perform tasks for the benefit of a person with a disability, or provide emotional support that alleviates one or more identified symptoms. Dogs and other animals can be assistant animals. So ADA and under the Fair Housing Act for service animals, right? And for our particular industry, but ADA, you can have a dog or you can have a miniature horse. In the Fair Housing Act, we have additional areas called assistant animals. Could be companion animals, some people use. Some people use emotional support animals. There's all kinds of names for them. We also must allow that, and that is not limited to the dog or the miniature horse. That is any animal that alleviates or provides emotional support. That's the difference. So Fair Housing Act, which we have to follow, of course we have to follow parts of the ADA for our buildings and if the people come to the public and leasing office and those things. But in our townhomes and our apartments, we also must allow emotional support, assistance animals, companion animals. And they're not limited to the dog and the miniature horse, right? Dogs and other animals can be assistant animals. They are not required to be trained or certified. And you may not ask for a service animal or an assistant animal papers, certification. Yes, you can do veterinarian shots and things like that, but you cannot say, show me the papers that they're certified, okay? Now, there was some changes, of course, that I want to just go over that they replaced in the 2013 guidance originally. And so I think you know that they just confirmed you can't charge pet rent. It's not a pet. So in your office, you have forms called animal forms if you're doing property management, and you have forms for pets if you allow pets. They're different. So you can choose to allow dogs at your property. You can have pet rent and you can have pet deposit. But as soon as I come in with a doctor's note or I open up the dialogue of reasonable accommodation, now it's an animal land and there's no pet rent and no pet deposit because it's not a pet. And you have to know that, because that's one of the silliest mistakes you're going to make that, to be frank, you should know better about, right? You can't charge the security deposit. You cannot require for a companion animal, service animal, additional insurance. And you cannot limit where the animal goes unless undue financial administrative burden could fundamentally alter the landlord's service. Lots of fights about whether or not, for heaven's sake, the cat gets to come into. Some properties do have more assistance and have lunchrooms and other things. And there's times that we just have to bring our attorneys in and help us get through those items, right? And so it's complicated. They don't have to say I have a reasonable accommodation. They're going to tell you about some of the examples I gave you. They don't have to put it in writing like I told you, and others can help them make the request on their behalf. They may seek a reasonable accommodation before or after the animal is acquired. That was a bit frustrating for us. So let's say you have a building with a no pet and you see a dog on the property and nobody in that home has completed the reasonable accommodation paperwork. We give a lease violation for that and then ask them to put their household in compliance, because our house and general rules and our items say no individual can be added to the lease, no animal or pets can be added to the lease without prior approval from management. Because we're just trying to make sure that we do our job and we do it well. But what we're not going to do at this point is make them kick the dog out. You're going to quickly do the paperwork. If they don't do the paperwork, well, then you're going to bring your attorney involved and figure out what are our options right now and how do we do this. Because it's tough, and we really, really want people come to us first. Let's get your paperwork done, and many wonderful residents do that. And so it's just a frustrating thing that we just have to deal with. But this is not the item that I want you to pick as your battle, because that's a bad pick for a battle. Figure it out, get it resolved, get the household in compliance, and keep moving on and get our jobs done, right? So what can we really ask? Well, we can ask, does the resident have a disability? Not what is your disability? Does the individual have a disability, and do you have a disability-related need? That's the next thing. I can have a disability, but it does not mean that I get the accommodation if I don't have a disability-related need. And so that you must ask for both of those items, and only if it's not readily apparent. If a person who has seeing or vision impairment, they have a seeing eye dog, they're using the walking stick or cane, I guess I'm not sure what the right word is for that, I'm not going to send into the doctor to confirm, because it's readily there and apparent. And HUD says if it's apparent, then you don't. Okay, you know, there's always ones that are tough. I gave you some tough ones in our examples we used. So documentation from the internet. This is a big struggle we deal with. People go and pay $70 or whatever it is online. They answer 10 questions and they suddenly get this great letter that says they're disabled and have a disability related need and they get to have a companion animal. And so, you know, most of us have our attorneys help with this because it's delicate and it's a challenge to us. And we're critical of that because licensed healthcare professionals deliver services remotely. We understand that, including over the internet. We're seeing it more and more. We're having our doctor visits via the Zoom like we're doing right now. So we're not saying it can't happen, but there needs to be a connection there to some degree, that they have personal knowledge of the individual to be able to say that you're disabled. You know, I broke my arm and it's going to heal and I'll be out of a cast in 6 weeks is not a disability, right? And so remember, go back to your definition. You can see it online. What is the definition of disability? Animals commonly kept in a household that we think are okay, you know, who knows? Dog, cat, small bird, rabbit, hamster, gerbil, other rodent, fish, turtle, other small domesticated animal, traditionally kept in home for pleasure. No breed, no weight restrictions. You know, unique animals, monkeys, kangaroos, other unique things, you know, you're going to immediately, and I don't want to keep saying you have to bring your attorney in, but I'm a certified fair housing specialist and I bring my attorney in. Some days I'm just too tired. I don't want to deal with this. It's too much. Help me guide me through this, because we just want to do it right. And I'm not letting a monkey move in, right? Now, there is a case, of course, of an individual who got an alligator, and you know that. So some days the best job we can do is just do our process and see where it takes us, right? Because it's not simple. All right, process reasonable accommodations promptly. Now, within 10 days seems really long to me. So to me, I think you should try to process it within 3 to 5. But you definitely need to, don't leave them sit there. We have one person that they come to at our office. They come to me, and because you really need to have the person trained, and you need to be giving the same responses and doing the correct thing continuously, right? And so that's important. All right, so tell me what, I leave lots of time for questions. And, you know, we've got 20 minutes. We don't have to stay the whole hour and a half on our call today, but I want your questions. And so if you want to take it off mute and ask, maybe turn your camera on so we can see that. Shannon will help me. Otherwise, type it in your chat. Tell me if you've got a problem that you want to see what the group thinks. There's a million slides I could cover and give you for advanced or fair housing. And so we just try to give you some good guts of information to get you thinking and give you areas that we know. While you're thinking or typing, and you can feel free to unmute and interrupt, be careful. There's a lot of testing going on right now. If in fact you are involved in property management, there's a lot of testing going on. You might get an email from lisa@yahoo.com and jose@yahoo.com. They're looking to see if your answers are the same, warm and welcoming. We have actual testing in person going on, having to do with disabilities and families and larger families. You need to assume every call, every response, every visit is a tester. It is significantly occurring at the moment. And so please be mindful of that. So tell me your questions if you've got any. I'm okay if you don't, but I'd love to answer any or give you my thoughts on it if you have one.
Lisa, it's Shannon here, and I was thinking in light of our audience, could you talk about, scenarios, guidance, practical thoughts about when a reasonable accommodation comes maybe through a maintenance request versus not, to the property manager side of things, but yeah, some of those scenarios, because I think for a lot of our folks on the call here, that's how this can crop up in that scenario too.
Well, let me give you some different examples. So I'll give you some things that have gone terribly wrong, and I'll give you some ideas of things of what you can do. So an individual in this building is getting a ceiling fan because they went into the office, they filled out paperwork, sent it off. The doctor said they need a ceiling fan because of their heart condition. They have congestive heart failure, they have some other things going on. And this property, we are required to pay for the accommodations. It got approved and it was installed. Okay. And we brought on an electrician, let's just say for this example, but maintenance was with them. And then while they're out there, they're going to go put somebody else's in down the hall, and they have to pay for theirs because they don't have a reasonable accommodation, but they wanted a ceiling fan in. And here, let's say hypothetically, it's $350 or whatever the world is. And the maintenance technician said, well, I wonder why you had to pay for it, because Evelyn didn't have to pay for hers. So we're never going to bring that up. We're never going to talk about that. If you have that question, that's a wonderful question for your supervisor or your manager, because we don't share information about other residents, and you would not. Now, if the resident told the other resident, because that happens occasionally, and maintenance is going to automatically, I'm saying, I have actually no knowledge of that, and so that question would need to be directed to the manager. You need to shut it down respectfully. And you just say again, it's the same thing when they say to you, I'm going to move out. And then you say, oh, okay, well, we're so sorry to see that you're going to leave. And then they don't put their notice in, and they come back and say, I told Frank. Telling Frank's not the option. Or I told Susie, the maintenance person. So your response is, again, please make sure that you talk with the manager about that. And because we want to direct them and direct them and direct them back to the manager. Now, if you're in the unit and somebody simply says, I've got this, geez, Susie, I got this heart condition, and I really need this lowered or this raised, I think your simple response is, that's a really good question. I hope you bring it up to the manager, because he or she will guide you through a process to see if they can help you with that. It's never, unless your company is different, it is never our maintenance technician's role to respond and to let me rephrase that, to answer, to direct, to give advice, you're simply going to, though, direct them. You are directing them, but directing them back to the manager. You're not going to say, that sounds like a reasonable accommodation. Yeah, sure, we'll do that. You're not going to say that. I need a cutout tub. I'm having a really hard time lifting my leg. I'm so sorry to hear that. Make sure you reach out to the manager, and he or she could help you with that challenge, I believe. Direct to the manager. So you just have to. Residents, sometimes at a senior building in particular, they just want some time with you, and they want to chat with you a lot and share a lot. But remember, we're not going to guide, we're not going to give those answers. One question I have here, has it always been the case that you can't restrict breed, pit bull, or weight? Okay, I'm going to go to that too, and then I'll do some more maintenance ideas and thoughts. So here's my question to you. So I just want to give you a little bit of back information. I was in New Orleans teaching, and this is a good 7 to 10 years ago. And I was doing an advanced class. People came from all over the United States. And I started out the class with, okay, in the last 6 months, who's been sued? And it was either 12 or 14 people raised their hand. I'm like, oh, that's terrible. And out of those, let's say it was 12, there was 7 or 9. There was going to be 9. There was only 3 people that this didn't apply to, all sued for the same thing. I'm like, ooh, what is this? Here's the call. You're all leasing agents at the moment. Here's the call that came to you. Hi, I'm wondering if you would allow me to have my companion pit bull, Samantha. And why did those 9 get sued? They said, we don't take pit bulls. Boom. Within weeks, they were served papers from this law firm It's been typical private law firms going about this and doing this, and some other, it's been interesting. It hit Minnesota a little bit. It hit North Dakota. I helped some clients there. It hit South Dakota. So it was kind of going by the states. So you may not have breed restrictions or size restrictions. And yes, it's actually always been that way. Now, let me just go further to say this. One of what you, if you choose, which most of us have gotten away with, getting away from, excuse me, if you choose to have pet restrictions, so meaning that you have an aggressive breed list that you won't allow. Do you know one of those dogs on there, if you go off the states and other places where you give me the top 10 aggressive breeds, is going to be a German Shepherd. And a German Shepherd is one of the top service animals, right? And I want to further tell you this, your insurance is never going to put in writing to you that they're not going to allow you to have the companion or service animal pit bull. Because a lot of you say, oh, my insurance doesn't allow it. Now, some of them have tried to say you can't allow for pets aggressive breeds. Okay, well, that's a different thing. You can choose to have an aggressive breed. It's complicated. It's a problem. All of you probably know it's the humans who screw up the dogs, not the dogs necessarily, but that's a different debate. And so you can do that. Most people went away from it and just did size restriction for pets because many of the aggressive were larger dogs. Whatever, you have to figure that out. But under companion and service animal, no breed restrictions, no size restrictions. If I walk into you, I briefly showed you a picture of Miss Moneypenny, my Newfoundland. I forgot that was on there. And she was 152 pounds. She was a very small Newfoundland, but she was a Newfoundland. If I walk into your office with my companion animal, let's just use my service animal. Let me say service animal instead of companion. Or if I apply and tell you I have a Newfoundland, and she's 152, and you have a 40-pound breed restriction, you're going to allow me to have her if that's for a reasonable accommodation, because you don't get to have that exception. And so, good question, and be very careful, because you are simply asking to be sued by not answering. And go back to your teams and go back to your staff and in your trainings and say, here's the question. Will you allow me to have my companion pit bull, Samantha? Let's see, figure out where your team is at so we know the answer. And yeah, maintenance, why do we want you on this training? Because we want you to understand why we make the decisions we do, the rules and the policies, and why less words at times are better, why you direct to the manager, you don't want to take this on. Don't take a fight on that you don't need. We don't want you fighting with any residents. We don't want you arguing with any residents. Unfortunately, that's the manager's job. You got to deal with that conflict or that problem or that challenge, not yours. You get to come in, get your work done, and get out. Come in, get out, less words. And so really, really important. So if somebody, and again, even if they stop you for a work order, thank you so much for telling me, but you have to put it in writing. Now, the laws have changed greatly. You better make sure that you're ready on 1/1. I mean, our attorney prepared us a 68-page handout for the new laws that are going into effect on 1/1, and one of them has to do with how we're going to have to give 24-hour notice, how we have to give time frames now. It has changed what we do. Some of you maybe already were doing all the things that they're requiring. Move in, move out inspections. Oh, new verbiage, new rules, new things we got to do. I mean, and we're grappling. We've already went to one training that our attorneys put on. We're grappling to how to get it all done by 1/1 and what's going to impact us, because we're changing rules and policies. So you need to look into that. MHA's got a lot of information on it. Maybe even NAHRO does. I don't know. It's complicated, and some very fundamental things have changed of how we do business. So you need to be ready. Now, they didn't tackle the service animal and companion animal, what we're just talking about, but they tackled a million of our policies and procedures, and some are going to be very difficult. And what will happen to us if the fridge breaks and the AC breaks and pest control issues? All I got to say is good luck with this. It's going to bombard the courts, and the courts are going to get real irritated. So I don't know where it's going to end and what will happen and what will get changed after that. But it's complicated. So get ready and know, even as an HRA, understand what the new changes will be is big. So that's kind of what I got for the maintenance part of it. Again, whenever you're asked, it's not your place to even remotely decide if that's a reasonable accommodation or not. Your place is, thank you so much for telling me, but all of those requests have to go directly to the office. Have a super great day and get on your work and in and out. And we talk about it in newsletters. Any requests you have, don't stop maintenance, because we're human, we're going to forget. Got to put the work order in. You're going to have to change your work orders, how they read, because they can maybe even give you an ability to come in before the 24 hours. And so there's going to be changes in how we do that. Any other
Lisa?
questions?
Yeah, I've got a follow-up.
Yeah.
One comment is for those on the call, we actually, Brandon England, he's a general counsel with the Duluth HRA, is going to be doing, basically he's going to repeat what he did at our conference in September on a webinar. It's on our website. That's November, I think it's November 4th, if memory serves me right. Anyway, so anybody on the call, you can sign up for that. It's free for Minnesota NAHRO members, and he's going to be walking through. Yeah, there is some changes. Granted, HRAs do this do a lot of these elements already, but there are some things to be mindful of. The second question I have is back to kind of this again. Companion animals, assistance animals, service animals are a big part of where issues crop up between residents with the folks in our units and stuff. Can you talk about, again, from the maintenance staff perspective, they're in a unit, they see, to the extent, basically the care and maintenance of the animal, right? What to, again, in that whole reasonable accommodation, but also managing that over the time and what that means in taking care of both the unit and etc. Any advice on that, again, of how those kind of things, and again, that interaction, what the maintenance brings back to the property manager, etc.
So that's a great question. A couple things that we want to talk about is, what are the policies of the building? So we in fact require, if we're coming in to do maintenance, that the dog be kenneled if you're not home. If you're home, they must be you must be either, whether it's holding onto the leash or holding on to them, if they're little, they must be in your control. Because as you may guess, we've had teammates be bit. And now you got workman's comp issues. Now you got problems with the household issues. So if you're going to have the rules, of course, the first piece is you got to enforce them. And what's the policy? Maintenance turns around and goes out. The dog's running around at the door. I mean, hello, I'm not going to simply open. Now, not just because they bark. Once you get a feel for, that's just where the kennel is, and they're kenneled and they're good. But as soon as you see that animal running loose, depending on your policies, you're going to shut the door. You're going to go back to the manager. You're going to follow up and say, I was not able to go in because that dog was loose and very aggressive, or just simply loose, whatever that is A. B, the harder part is when we see bad things. We see a litter box that hasn't been cleaned in a month. Oh, it's just awful. The smell, the poor cat, there's about 3 pieces of litter left that you got to go back and you got to write that up to manager or talk with manager. Now, let me be very clear. Do not take a note. Manager's gone out at a meeting, walking units, whatever's going on. Do not take a note and write, this home was a pig pen, filthy. These people are slobs. Absolutely nothing like that in writing ever. You use your words and you use them well, because those documents all could end up in a court case. And I need you to be real mindful. So don't let emotion rule your tongue at the time or your words. Simply factually state what occurred. The home had a litter box that appeared to have not been cleaned in many weeks. There was no actual litter left to be used. There is dog feces in each room of the home on the carpet. The smell in the home is significant pet urine smell. We want to factually talk about it. Don't exaggerate. Don't exaggerate. And you have to go to your company policy on, is it okay to take a picture? Is it not? The rules of your company will guide you. If you don't have rules, then let's talk about what that looks like and what do we do in those situations. So be careful of that. Put that note. Manager's role, of course, is then to follow up and help that household put their household in compliance with your lease and your house and general rules and whatever your rules are. And then they're going to re-inspect. That again should be under the manager's plate. If for some reason you're maintenance and manager, a little bit trickier, but you definitely need to go out. If your policy is the dog must be kenneled so you don't get hurt. If the dog aggressive and is appears to going to attack you, get out. I mean, you got to be safe, and so we want to write those items up, date and time them neutrally. Don't exaggerate. Let me be frank. In 31 years, we got enough going on that we don't need to exaggerate. Just calmly share what happened. Be careful. Notes to file, ladies and gentlemen, if you're doing the roles of property management, are incredible. What we typically do is the first time we talk to you, we put a note to the file, date and time. And I spoke with the resident about picking up the feces outside because our policy is very clear. The second it hits the ground, you pick it up. Not that afternoon, not every 3 days, not once a week, the second. And we make individuals initial each paragraph, but during the move-in further, I want them to read the paragraph, have them sign. Do you have any questions? Read the next paragraph, have them sign. I want this to be successful. So what do we do as a company to try to help that be more successful? And then we need to be aware of it right away so we can nip a problem quickly and deal with that. We used to consider charging people to pick it up because the lawn mowing is a problem. We got residents complaining they got kids coming home with dog poop on their shoes. We got, if you got tax credit in other areas, they're not a fan of that. So be careful depending on the subsidies and what you have programmed, what you can do and what you can't do and why you're charged. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. I mean, I don't mean it disrespectfully because when it goes well, it seems to just go well. And we have wonderful people that take care of their animals, and we have people that do terrible things with their animals, and pets. So it's trying to stay unemotional, put your stuff in writing, very factually, do your follow-up, make sure I am always in my mind preparing for a judge. I'm preparing for court. I'm sorry, that maybe seems extreme, but I want it done right, and I don't want to deal with it later. So where's the notes on this? And another little thought too, and we all can be, do this, is sometimes we react quickly, and sometimes maybe we need to take a second and make sure we've gotten every piece of information available before we plan our motion or action plan. Because sometimes I'm like, ooh, had I known that. And you have to learn your teammates, how they speak, how they talk. Theoretically, sometimes people will tell you, this story is here and this story is here, and most likely somewhere in the middle is the truth. Now, that would imply everybody's lying, and that's not what I'm trying to imply. But everybody can skew things, or many people can skew things. So we got to kind of try to stay on where that is for you to do that. So be mindful and be safe, and definitely use your note to file. If it continues again, then we typically give a violation. And then the third time we'll sit down and try to meet, or a phone call from the corporate office, whether senior regional or myself, to try to tackle the problem. So I hope that answered your question. We've only got 2 more minutes left, so if anybody else has got one, otherwise we'll call it a day. Any other questions from anyone? Well, I hope you enjoyed the training. I hope you learned some interesting things. I hope it was helpful to you. And as always, remember, you're making a really positive difference in this world by providing housing, and it makes a difference. So keep doing the good work that you're doing.
Lisa, thank you so much. Appreciate your insights. Again, it's so helpful to know somebody who's kind of walked the walk, present on this, what can be a really challenging issue. And so many times it's comes to our attention because of the work that maintenance staff are doing. So for all of you out there, thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate the time you took with us. And we will be in touch. We have one more left in this series for our maintenance and property managers. We'll be getting you, letting you know about that. And of course, that happens in, one more. Yeah, it's October. I got double. We've got one more as we wrap up the year. So thanks everyone for your time and attention. And we'll also be following up with a PowerPoint from Lisa to share with you. Have a great rest of your week. Take care.
Hi, everybody.